Today, we're going to tackle two of the most intense stories of trial and faith ever recorded. And trust me, each one offers a powerful lesson on how to endure the absolutely unthinkable. It's a question that's probably crossed all of our minds at some point. Why do good people have to face impossible trials? It's this huge, profound mystery, right? And it sits at the very heart of what we think about suffering and faith. So to get some perspective on this, we're actually going to look at two ancient stories. Both come from the Hebrew Bible, and they give us two totally different but equally profound ways of looking at how you endure the unthinkable. All right, first things first, let's meet the main characters at the heart of these stories. Think of them as our case studies in what it means to hold on to faith when absolutely everything is on the line. So, on one hand, we've got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You might know them as friends of the prophet Daniel. And on the other hand, we have Job. He's described as this incredibly pious, wealthy guy, someone who, fears God and shuns evil. So we're not talking about just anyone here. These are people who are explicitly described as righteous. And their faith? Well, it's about to be put to the ultimate test. Okay, so our first story comes straight out of the book of Daniel, and it is a super dramatic public showdown. We're talking a high-stakes clash where faith goes head-to-head with absolute power. So picture this. We're in ancient Babylon. The king, Nebuchadnezzar, he builds this enormous golden statue, and then he issues a decree, and it's basically a death sentence. Anyone who doesn't bow down and worship this thing gets thrown into a blazing furnace. Can you imagine? The political and social pressure must have been just immense. And what happens? Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they stand firm. Their refusal isn't quiet or subtle. No, it's direct, it's public, and it is just an incredible act of defiance against the most powerful man in their world. They literally chose loyalty to their God over their own lives. And this part is so crucial, you guys. Their trust wasn't just some abstract, private belief they held in their heads. Nope, it was a physical act. The text calls it yielding up their bodies. This was faith as action. A conscious, deliberate commitment to face those flames, showing they believed in a higher power even when they had zero guarantee they'd be rescued. Okay, now we're going to shift gears completely. We're moving from that huge, public spectacle of defiance to the story of Job. And his trial, it's the total opposite. It's deeply personal, it's private, and it's just shrouded in mystery. So what happens to Job? In this unbelievably rapid succession of just catastrophic events, this righteous man loses, well, everything. All 10 of his children, gone. All of his incredible wealth and property, gone. And then his own health fails. He's left completely desolate, abandoned by his family, even questioned by his friends. The scale of the loss is almost impossible to wrap your head around. And that, right there, is why the story of Job has stuck with people for thousands of years. As one source puts it really well, the book tackles the central problem of the suffering of the righteous. And it doesn't give you any easy answers. Instead, it just forces you to sit with that question. Why would a good person have to face such unimaginable pain? So, think about it. Unlike that one big, decisive act of Daniel's friends, Job's trial was a long, slow, grinding journey. For him, faith wasn't about having answers or figuring out why all this was happening. It was just patience. It was perseverance through this unimaginable, unexplained agony. And this really shows us that faith isn't always a loud, bold declaration. Sometimes it's just that quiet refusal to give up hope, even when you have every single reason to. So we have these two incredibly different trials, right? One's a literal fiery furnace, and the other is the slow burn of personal loss. The big question is, how did they respond when their faith was pushed to its absolute limit? And this is where we see two distinct paths of faith. For Daniel's friends, it was all about being public and defiant. It was a clear refusal to bow to earthly power, showing their trust through one courageous act. But for Job, his faith was private and persevering. It was that quiet refusal to curse God, showing his trust through just steadfast endurance. It's like these two stories are showing us that faith isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It actually adapts its form to whatever trial it's up against. Okay, so what can we actually take away from these ancient stories? What do they teach us about facing our own trials, today?
Well, it seems like there are three really big lessons here. First, there's this idea of acknowledging a higher sovereignty, basically accepting that some things are just beyond our control or our understanding. That's something Job definitely had to learn. Second, it's about maintaining faith in uncertainty. In both stories, real trust is shown before anyone knows how it's all going to end. And finally, the third takeaway is about finding purpose in the trial itself. Seeing suffering not as just a punishment, but maybe as part of a bigger spiritual journey that can, in the end, lead to restoration.
Now it's true, both stories do have a happy ending, right? Daniel's friends are saved from the fire, and Job gets all his fortunes back. But, and this is the most important part, the central lesson isn't really about the reward at the end. It's all about their faithful response during the trial. That's what really matters. And that really leaves us with a pretty powerful question for ourselves. When you're facing your own fiery furnace or some kind of unexplained loss, what does true faith look like for you? Is it going to be that moment of public defiance? Or is it going to be that quiet, steady endurance?